Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live once again in the old home office in West Lafayette. This is neither of the Twin Cities, not Minneapolis nor St. Paul. This is West Lafayette, and this is my office at home. And Purdue just lost 71 to 68 at Minnesota, and now I'm going to talk about it for anywhere from 8 minutes to an hour and a half. This is brought to you by our friends at the Purdue Union Club Hotel, the newly reinvented Purdue Union Club Hotel. Please keep them in mind next time you plan a trip to campus. Diving right into it here, I don't normally script these things very well. I normally write down a couple of words just to trigger my memory, but I didn't even do that this time. So I'm just going to look at the box score and I'm going to talk. This game came down to a lot of things, but clearly, to me, the number one thing was simply luck, dumb luck, unfriendly luck in Purdue's case, and favorable luck in Minnesota's case. That's probably oversimplifying things a little bit, but it's really not. I counted unofficially 11 points Minnesota scored out of their 71 directly off bad bounces. I shouldn't say bad bounces because they were good bounces for Minnesota. They were bad bounces for Purdue. There was a stretch of possessions in the first half for Minnesota that I thought were both easily could have been turnovers, that Minnesota wound up recovering the ball, scoring off both. That was a 5-0 run for Minnesota where there could have been back-to-back turnovers. I shouldn't say 5-0 run. I can't remember if Purdue scored in between, but that was 5 points where there would have been 2 turnovers under a different set of circumstances. Marcus Carr's 2 threes in the final minute and a half, or final minute and 10, whatever it was. One is a situation where Jamal Mashburn Jr. breaks down the defense, gets in the lane. Travion Williams plays good defense, swats his shot, but does so straight to Marcus Carr, of all people, wide open for a rhythm three-pointer. Can't blame Eric Hunter for leaving him. He was reacting to the action of the offense. He was probably getting in position to rebound or help on the ball, whatever it might have been. Just a bad break. Just a really bad break for Purdue. But the next break was worse because the next 3 Marcus Carr hit, he banked in, which is obviously on the playgrounds. We would use a word that I can't say here because I know the FCC and YouTube's algorithms are probably keeping close watch on my language here, but it starts with a B and ends with a T, and you can figure it out. But nobody who banks in a 3 plans to bank in a 3, and this was the Andre Wesson 3 against Purdue, against Ohio State in 2017 or whatever year that was. That game that cost Purdue a Big Ten title on Keita Bates-Diop's putback. If Andre Wesson doesn't pull that banked-in three-pointer out of his nether region, Purdue would have won that game almost certainly. I think Musa Jallow, either he banked one in or he just made one he never made. But I'm way off topic here. Bad bounces, just the simple breaks of a game that's played with a ball full of air. It can do a lot of different things on you. It can go a lot of different ways. I'm sure I can go back and watch the game tomorrow and see if there was any superhuman efforts Purdue could have made or just better efforts Purdue could have made to at least get in the way of the balls, or if not recover them. I don't know. I just know the ball found its way to Minnesota, and the ball found its way through the net on one occasion for Minnesota when it can be chalked up more than anything just to good fortune on Minnesota's part and bad fortune on Purdue's part. The other part of it too is people always say that you don't get calls on the road in the Big Ten, and I think that's probably largely true. I try not to be blame the refs guy because I think it makes me sound like a fan, like an unobjective observer, but also because I think that when I do mention the officiating, I should have some credibility. And if I sounded like a whining fan about the officials after every game, it wouldn't carry any weight when I actually say, hey, I think the officials might have, shortchanged Purdue here. But block charge calls are tough. They're probably the toughest call in basketball. They can go either way 95% of the time. I'm always conflicted about questioning block charge calls because I just think it's such a complicated call. But going back and watching the call against Mason Gillis that fouled him out and gave Marcus Carr his only 2 free throws of the game in the final minute when they were really big free throws, that looked like a charge to me. His feet were outside the circle. He looked to me like he was stationary before Carr contacted him. Again, a close play, a bang-bang play, but as it always is, but it sure looked like a charge to me. Is the home team going to get that call more often than not when the tie goes to the runner? Yeah, probably. But it still bears mentioning nonetheless. The second play, obviously the travel on Trayvon Williams. I haven't gone back and Zabruder filmed it yet in terms of watching it over and over 100 times. But I will say this: I mentioned credibility earlier, and Matt Painter is not a guy who comes out after games too and makes excuses or blames people other than himself and his team for losses. So when he comes out and actually says things about officiating, this isn't Fred McCaffrey complaining about the refs like he does after every game. This is Matt Painter, who I think has as much, if not more, credibility than any coach in the Big Ten and most in America. I think when he comes out and he's outspoken about the officials messing up a call, I've never been part of a press conference before where a coach is asked about whether or not he can get fined for what he just said about the officials. Even though I didn't think Painter said anything particularly provocative, he was asked that nonetheless. But I do think that Purdue was on the short end of a couple of calls here. But again, you can look at this a lot of different ways. And when Purdue lost to Minnesota in football on the egregious offensive pass interference call, there's two ways to look at it, and it depends on your worldview and it depends on your mood. Did Purdue lose that game because of that one singular call, or did they lose that game because they were in position for that one call to go against them? The answer is always both. It is always both, because the butterfly effect takes hold. One thing goes differently at any other point in the game. When a game is this close, it's a different game. And with that being said, a lot went into this for Purdue. Again, empty possessions at the end of the game for Purdue, the Trayvon Williams basket notwithstanding, but just some empty possessions for Purdue. I think, when you're young, and I think, Jaden Ivey's put himself in a position here where he's, maybe your best playmaker. And I think that's really helped Purdue at the ends of games here. The Ohio State game comes to mind, obviously, but I think they've had to put the ball in his hands quite a bit. When you're young like this, guys have to play through stuff, and they have to grow into roles, and they have to grow into situations. And I think that puts you in situations sometimes when you're at the mercy of their decision making, and that's probably the most important thing for Purdue offensively of anything is decision making. That's the most important thing for young players, period. And the late turnover and the 1-3 he missed, that might not have been the perfect shot for Purdue at the time, when he's been so good at getting to the basket and he's been so good at making plays for other people. I think he got a little bit trapped there on the travel. Probably should have moved the basketball a little bit more, tried to get it back, whatever it might have been, gotten the ball inside. I have to go back and watch it tomorrow. I don't know. But I do think, for as much as the Michigan State and Ohio State wins on the road masked Purdue's youth, I think Purdue's youth has shown up a little bit in the Maryland and the Minnesota games, ever so slightly. So I think late game execution. I did not ask Painter about the play where Stefanovic threw the ball all the way down the court on the inbound. I'm not making excuses here, but it is tough covering these games from home. I get to my computer. I have to get something on our site ASAP. I try to print out the box score. My printer's a piece of garbage. I'm fiddling with that normally. And all of a sudden, I look down at the Zoom window, and there's a player sitting there waiting for me to ask a question. I haven't had time to plan my questions, anything like that. I did a horrible job in the press conference today. No excuses, but I am just saying I don't really have – I have a disturbingly short amount of time to think about my questions before I ask them. That's the Big Ten's fault, because all of these games keep coming down to the wire. I don't have time to mentally prepare for press conferences. I know this sounds like total sports writer diva stuff, but it is real. I have like 5 minutes to get something on our site, to get the many things we put up right away. You don't care about any of this, but this is just a streaming flow of consciousness here. So I didn't ask Painter about the inbound, the full court inbound to Stefanovic, because I simply dropped the ball on it. But late game execution, that's what the umbrella that falls under. Purdue could have done a better job late. Again, the Trayvon Williams travel has been well documented, so I won't even bring that back up. But did I even talk about that in the first place? I don't remember. Anyway, that's the other call that obviously Purdue objected to. The other thing Purdue obviously could have done differently here tonight was pretty obvious: make a shot. And I just don't understand how team wide, if one guy has an off night, that's to be expected. If another guy has an off night, that's to be expected. But how things snowball on teams, I've never understood in basketball. It just doesn't seem to stand to reason. But Purdue has good shooters on this team. They're demonstrably good shooters. Sasha Stefanovic is not back yet. That matters. But Purdue was streaky before Sasha Stefanovic got COVID. But Purdue going 2 of 17 from three is just, this stuff just is really shocking, because Purdue is a better shooting team than this. They just have this penchant for bottoming out at times, and it just doesn't stand to reason. I think there's some things at play amongst it. I don't think Eric Hunter's shooting nearly as well as he's capable, or Purdue expected him to, or he expected him to. If any small part of that is a knee injury to start the season, that is very possible. I think Jaden Ivey's volume is probably out of whack a little bit with where he is as a player at this point in time. There's no doubt in my mind he puts every ounce of himself into his jump shot. No doubt in my mind at some point in his college career in which he's going to be a great player. He's going to be a good shooter. I think right now he's a penetrator first and foremost, and I think his volume maybe contradicts that a little bit, and that falls under the umbrella of the decision making I mentioned earlier. I think Aaron Wheeler, after his redshirt freshman year, for whatever reason, just has not been able to make a shot. I mean, it's the same player taking the same shots with the same form. They just don't go in anymore, and that's just baffling to me. I don't understand how capable shooters can just run dry on them just like that. I shouldn't snap my fingers under the desk because you can't see it. It doesn't have the same effect than when I do it like that. But Aaron Wheeler hasn't, been a particularly effective three-point shooter for a season and a half now, and it just doesn't stand to reason to me. If he could shoot 32, 33%, whatever it is, he'd be a guy who's averaging 6 or 7 points a game for you, and all of a sudden, things are a little bit different offensively. I don't put a lot of stock in the plus minus all the time, but I do think it matters at positions where there's a clear distinction between the starter and the guy who comes in for the starter. And those two guys combine to play all the minutes at the position, and there's a little bit more flow to what they're able to do. And so I just noticed this, so I'm just going to mention it. But I think the 4 is one of those positions because it's either Gillis or Wheeler on the floor. Now Wheeler plays with backups more often, so that bears mentioning. But Mason Gillis is plus 11, and Aaron Wheeler is minus 13. So obviously, the situation here where Wheeler is not playing as well as Wheeler would like to be playing. Wheeler's not playing as well as Purdue would like him to be playing, and you just keep hoping. You just keep hoping that there's going to be that one game where he just breaks out and then things turn around for him. But this has been a year-plus long, slump. A lot of flashes in there. A lot of flashes of high-energy play, of garbage man type stuff that really affects the games. But the consistency is nowhere to be found. The three-point shooting just has fallen off, the side of a cliff since his redshirt freshman year. And I think the fact too that he struggles to make shots is one of those factors that goes into the broader issues of Purdue's percentages that belie their overall ability. I think you want Stefanovic shooting your threes, you want Brandon Newman shooting your threes, you want Mason Gillis shooting the good ones, you want Ivey shooting on low volume, you want good looks for Isaiah Thompson, you want Eric Hunter shooting high percentage ones, which I think he would make way more often than not, and I think that's kind of your mix right now. All of those guys are capable of making shots, but it's just not the way it's working for Purdue right now, and Purdue's got to find answers because all these games are close. All of these games are going to be close, and you always run that risk of a 2 of 17 game getting you beat. 2 of 17 was one of many things that got you beat tonight. It wasn't maybe the singular thing that got you beat, but there might be a night where it is a singular thing that gets you beat, where if you make one more three, you win the game, but you don't, so you lose the game, that kind of thing. It's so hard to just say, just make more shots. It's because it sounds so simple, but obviously for Purdue, it hasn't been this year. So a lot went into this loss. The most notable is just bad luck. The second most notable is simply, Purdue's objections to the officiating. and then obviously all that went into putting this game in a toss-up situation in the first place. I thought Purdue had a lot of opportunities when Minnesota was turning the ball over to stretch out their lead a little bit. Couldn't do it. They had some important late offensive possessions where they couldn't get a good possession. And here you are. Universe kind of balanced itself out a little bit. You won really close 50-50 games at Michigan State and Ohio State. You lost really close 50-50 games at Maryland and now Minnesota. That's kind of the Big Ten this year, but Purdue's not getting its doors blown off. That's a little consolation right now, but young teams in this league could easily just be getting chewed up and spit out. That's no consolation to Purdue. That's no consolation to you, but that's bears mentioning anyway. So that's what I got. This has gone way too long. 16 minutes. Thank you to the Purdue Union Club Hotel, the newly reinvented Purdue Union Club Hotel, for your support here. Please keep them in mind next time you plan a trip to campus. For goldenblack.com, this is Brian Neubert. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. And thank you for processing our materials, however it is you process our materials. And we'll talk to you again next week after Purdue plays Michigan State. Thank you, everybody.